Stop it! You can only hope to continue.
Well, it looks a little different if you're watching on YouTube. It's the BackChat basketball show here with Dan and Ben. Ben, you're not next to me. You're all the way across the country. You're in Perth. I'm in Melbourne. What's it
No,
like over there?
it's stinking hot. You've gone big time and escaped over to Melbourne to hang out with Chris Ansky and Dirk Nowitzki and all the big dogs
Yep.
for the week. And we're just here in Perth melting away. So how's Melbourne? Is it cooler than Perth? I hope it is.
It was a bit warm. I was out and about today taking in the sights and was walking around in jeans and a t-shirt and didn't feel like too hot, but I didn't pack anything for any cold. So I'm just hoping that it doesn't get cold at all. And I know it's probably going to bite me in the ass. I know Melbourne always has like a random rain patch in there somewhere with some cold weather. So hopefully it stays pretty clear for me. But yes, I am over in Melbourne waiting to hang out with Dirk. I'm in a friend's house at the moment, as you can see behind me.
That's the takeaway for anyone watching online is that Dan's an intellectual today with that wonderful background. I'm a little bit jealous.
With the library, and there's a piano off to the side. I might jump on that if the conversation runs a bit dry.
You've got a bike as well, so fitness, reading. Is that golf clubs? It looks like it's all set up.
Yep. It's got a good setup here. I might actually move in if I get stuck over here. Dirk's not here at the house with us. He's staying at some hotel. I did.
Did you decline the invite?
Yeah, I was
disappointed.
I said,
you declined the invite.
Yeah, I said, mate, I'm over to see. Look, I'll see you on Wednesday. I don't want to do too much. I don't want a bit of overkill. So Dirk and Chris can wait a bit.
I manage the number one sports podcast in Australia. I don't have time to hang out with you at your hotel.
I know. That's right. He's got the camp that was happening. So we are recording this. Usually we record this on a Wednesday afternoon and then release it straight away. So this is coming out still same time, but we are recording it a day early. Today is the Dirk Nowitzki basketball camp. Now, I did almost sign up for that. I was really close, and I thought, I don't want to be that random 33-year-old at a camp full of kids because I wasn't sure how much of a camp it was, like if it was for small children or not. It didn't say anything in the age. So, but I'm glad because apparently it's just full of kids.
You had the perfect cover, though. You've got young kids. You could have just chucked on them on the plane with you and enrolled the young one and just rocked up and said, oh, unfortunately, the little one's sick or injured and daddy's coming out to play. So you actually had the perfect – you did, exactly right. Same surname.
Yep. Yeah, we do look similar and we're similar height too, so I probably could have shaved my face. Yeah, no, actually my son doesn't have a beard, which is odd. But anyways, I am over in Melbourne. There's plenty of basketball stuff to chat through. So let's get into some NBA because we just start in the NBA because of the time zone. Makes sense. No, I don't know why. We just start in the NBA. Durant is injured again, and I saw a photo collage today of all the times that his knee has been injured, and it's like the same thing every single time. Someone falling backwards onto it. It didn't look good.
No. He had one of the unluckiest careers of anyone, right? Because he's amazing. Going to be Hall of Famer, top 20 player of all time. Yep. But he's had these few injuries. He broke his foot in OKC when they were ready to win a championship a few years ago, or almost a decade ago. I'm aging myself there. The same thing happened in Golden State. He tore his Achilles. And just when this Brooklyn team has turned things around, Kyrie Irving, knock on wood, was a good basketball player again and not someone that was causing distress off the court. And Durant got injured. So on one hand, it's obviously frustrating for the Nets, but I think as well it kind of shows where they're at, doesn't it, that they were relying too much on Kevin Durant, who is 34 years old. Yep. And unfortunately, he's a bit injury prone these days. Again, not that this was in his control, but he always seems to walk into these 20-game absences, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's odd that you say Kevin Durant's 34. Like you just sort of alluded that it's sort of aging you a bit. It seems really strange that he's 34 because that feels like when I was like in the peak of my fandom, like Durant was really, really young. And now he's like, not on the out, but, there's not like another max contract, 5-year deal hanging over his head. That's for sure.
It's a bit scary, isn't it? I got into the NBA when Kevin Durant was playing at Texas when I was still finishing high school. So again, I don't even want to think about what that means for me and you. We're definitely aging ourselves there.
Yeah.
And you're right. He's got 3 or 4 years left and he'll be gone from the NBA. Like we've both never known the NBA without Durant.
Yep.
I don't want to think about that because he's such a great player. And I was kind of hoping he would have a moment this season like your boy Dirk did in 2011, carrying a team that's not so great into the finals. Yep. And maybe he still will. But he's going to be on ice probably through All-Star weekend now. And do you trust Kyrie Irving to lead that team to wins over the next month?
Look, maybe it gives the Nets, I don't know, a bit. They put the bit of responsibility on him, and he might say maybe take something away from that so that when Durant comes back, but I don't know. It's hard to know.
I think that was the diplomatic answer for no, it's not going to happen. I have no trust in our boy Kyrie, and even my friend Ben Simmons. It's been a few years since he's had to be that number one player. So again, the only potential silver lining I can see is that Ben's going to have the ball in his hands more, and maybe he can get back to his form from 3 years ago. But again, in terms of aging ourselves and aging athletes, it's been almost 3 years since Ben Simmons was an All-Star, and that feels like an eternity ago, doesn't it?
Yeah, what also feels like an eternity is seeing Steph Curry on the court, but he has been, they changed them from questionable to probable. These words that they use to say that the players will probably be back to play. It didn't seem like it was that long ago, but when you looked it up, it was around December since he played. It will be good to have Steph Curry back on the court because it's always a show when he's playing, and that Warriors team definitely needs it.
There's a theme today. We're losing track of time, aren't we? And again, it's been a month that he's been out of it, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but somehow the Warriors have climbed in the standings since he left, and they're only 2 games outside of a top 4 seed now. And the West hasn't been that good in the middle, and it's allowed the Warriors to tread water. And you're right, he's been out before Christmas, so it's been a month. And the Warriors are now sitting pretty when he's about to return. So it's a bit sad that Durant goes out and Steph's about to come in. But for the Warriors, they become a must-watch lethal team again with Steph back. And we've just seen that they can't generate offense without him. And now he's coming back. He'll probably be on a bit of a slow burn. But again, the West hasn't done anything to scare the Warriors. And once he gets back to speed, I think they're going to look very scary very soon.
It's a bit annoying, really. It's like it happened 2 or 3 seasons ago. The Warriors sort of looked a bit done. And then last season, obviously, they won the championship. They just got everyone back, and then they looked lethal again. And I'm sort of hoping that doesn't happen again. It would be nice to see some other finalists in the Western Conference.
Is that your Mavs fandom talking? Like, do you think the Mavs 100%. Do you think the Mavs have any chance of beating them if Steph Curry is playing?
Oh yeah, I do. I think
really.
Yeah, I think if Luka's shown that he can do like crazy things. I don't know if he can do that all the way through the season. They needed him to have a bit of a slump or something so that he finds that lightning in a bottle at the right time in the postseason, or they need to make a trade before the deadline that gives him some sort of help. They've done some odd things this last few weeks. They signed Kemba Walker, then they dropped him, and that was never going to be that beneficial. Nico, the GM, said, "Oh man, his knee's cooked." Like from the beginning when they signed him, they knew what they were getting. So in this quest to try and find another ball handler, it just hasn't really gone that way. But who knows? The trade deadline always gives us something crazy. I'm hoping that the Mavs can do something because, like you said, the West doesn't look that deadly. If I just bring up the standings, so there's only 5 teams, including the Sacramento Kings, I might add, above 500. So the Warriors, who are in 6th place, 20 wins, 20 losses. And then the next, the Kings are 21 wins. So that's a really different looking landscape of the NBA when for so long, as long as I can remember, the West has always been the tough conference. And, if you're getting out of the East, it's a Mickey Mouse sort of thing when you compete, when the teams on the West are competing against all these powerhouses. It's completely flipped the switch. So right now, the only way to be in the 8 is to be in the 8 is to be above 500 on the East. So the Heat are 21-20 above 500. So that's such a different thing. So if the Mavs can't capitalize on this sort of wishy-washy Western Conference, it's not a lost season, that's for sure. But if there's ever going to be a time to capitalize when your team's not like actually that incredible, then this is probably the one. But the Nuggets in the first seed look very good.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, that Luka and the Mavs are following, personally, I think the LeBron James blueprint from 2007, 2008, where you're getting the best player in the world with a pretty average team around him.
Yeah.
And the Western Conference has become the East from that time 15 years ago, because you're right, like our whole adult life, the Eastern Conference has been the second tier league, that LeBron ran that for so many years. And he could take a bunch of scrubs, which he did many times, to the finals. Even Boobie Gibson, Zydrunas Ilgauskas, Anderson Varejao, all those players good on them. They made a lot of money,
Delonte.
but they're not. Well, we won't tell stories about Delonte and LeBron's mum, but they had a great run there for a while. And even looking at the All-Star teams, someone on a podcast I was listening to this week went through and read out the Eastern Conference All-Star team from 2013, and Joakim Noah was the fourth best player on that team. And Joakim was a good player, but that kind of says it all. And I think with All-Star coming around, you're going to have someone like Jason Tatum not starting for the East, where he would possibly be the first wing picked in the West. So we're seeing the talent start to balance out. And you're right about the Mavs, that you look at even someone like New Orleans or Memphis, other young teams, they haven't done near anything in the postseason.
Yes.
So this conference is wide open. And again, I think we both love watching Jokic play. We think is amazing. But there are valid questions as to whether he can sustain defensively in the postseason.
Yep.
So again, if one of these teams can make a big trade, like we said about the Warriors, even with Steph back, if they win 5 games in a row, they go from just mid-tier to being the third seed.
And if they get home court advantage, like honestly, I do not want to face the Warriors in the postseason when they've got home court.
No.
So yeah, look, I just hope that the teams that the Mavs and above just keep winning games and keep the Warriors out of it. Jokic did another great, like he just keeps pulling out these stats every other day, it seems like. So today I've lost it as I scroll around. His stat line wasn't that impressive because we've seen him do like 70 points, 50 rebounds, and 40 assists. Like he does like those sorts of things. But today he had, I think it was 14 points, 15 rebounds. Here we go. I'm just gonna control it. 14 points, 11 rebounds, 16 assists. But he does it on 100% shooting. Like he just doesn't miss all night. Has a near perfect game. And that's the sort of thing you're going to get from Jokic, these incredible feats.
He's just like a kid playing with his food, isn't he? That whatever he wants to do, he can do. If he wants to score 40 points, he'll do that. If he wants to get 15 rebounds and 15 assists and pass all night, which is kind of what he did this morning, right? He took 5 shots, I think. 6 shots maybe, including the 3. So he doesn't even need to shoot the ball. And he's the best player on the court. And again, it kind of just looks so different, doesn't it? Because he's a white guy, he's 7 foot tall, he's a bit fat, let's be real. So he's not a prototypical LeBron James level athlete.
Yep.
But he's just so smart and in control. And again, the fact that he can just put up another triple-double. I think I thought this morning as well, it's the 3rd time he's done this. It's the 3rd time he's had a triple-double without missing a shot. So if you take, I don't know, pick a player. If Joe Ingles, who we'll talk about in a second, did that once in his career, it would be the highlight of his career. And Joe's a good player, made $100 million, had a great career. But Jokic is doing this every night to a point now where he's probably not going to get a 3rd MVP because people are bored of him, which is an incredible thing. Imagine being that good at something and just being able to cruise and you know you're the best in the world and it's not even hard.
Yeah, that's right. I think Giannis is doing similar things. He's putting up huge numbers. This last couple of months has been superstar after superstar putting up just wild strings of games. And it's funny, when I was naming, I think I named last week's episode something about, I was going to say something about superstars putting up big points. And 7 episodes before that, it was like something similar. And I went back and literally there was a time, I think 2.5 months ago, where the same thing happened. Everyone was just like 40 points, 50 points, 40 points, 50 points. It's just a really cool time to be watching basketball if you love offense, that's for sure.
We haven't spoken in person since Christmas time, and of course that's when Luka had his 60-point triple-double, and Giannis put up a 55-20 game, and Kevin Durant's had big games. Tatum's pushed 50. CJ McCollum's gone off. This scoring is up across the board, and again, a podcast I was listening to yesterday was saying they were on track to see the highest amount of 50-point and 40-point games in a season in the history of the NBA. No one except Wilt has done this consistently in a season, and we're popping up and seeing it every night. And again, it really does make me think, though, if everyone can score the ball, the first team that can play some defense is going to be so far ahead. And again, if we think about the MVP discussion, all these guys are putting up ridiculous stats that it's almost become boring to put up 40, isn't it? Like 40 is the new 30. It's almost like you have to score 40 points a game once a month to be in the MVP discussion. And imagine doing that 10 years ago. You would have been so far in front of the MVP, it wouldn't have been funny.
Well, Luka, I think, is about 130 points ahead of Tatum. Last I looked at it anyway, in the scoring title. And I know they go averages. They don't go total points. But he's been putting up huge numbers, like consistently. And Tatum's only 100 and so behind. Like all it will take is Luka to miss a few games here and there, and Tatum put him up, and he'll be right up there again.
let's just hope Luka keeps scoring, because your boy here might have jumped on Luka Doncic to win the scoring title at the start of the year at 7-1 odds. So
Really? Very good.
We need Luka Doncic. Don't worry about the MVP, Dan. He doesn't need the MVP. He just needs to average 40 points a game for the rest of the year and do a solid for the BackChat basketball podcast.
For sure. I think if he can get the Mavs to like the second, third, see, like home court, if he can get the Mavs home court advantage in the playoffs, he will be hard to not write his name down in the MVP vote at the end.
Yeah.
Because like you said, Jokic is a boring pick. Giannis has almost become a boring pick. And I hate to say it, Luka is, even before the season started, everyone was already saying if Luka's here, he's gonna take it.
It's why the Durant injury is such a shame this morning, because honestly, I thought Durant was about to ascend into that MVP discussion, because the stats might not be there, but we know how our American media friends like to vote. It's about story, it's around narrative, and it's around big names. And I think the NBA media is wanting to give this to an American athlete again, because remember, Giannis won 2 in a row, then Jokic. So it's been 5 years since an American player won the NBA MVP. And again, I look at that. The Boston Celtics have a large media contingent, hence why Jason Tatum is getting a lot of attention. He's a great player, but he's not winning the MVP this year. And it's interesting. I've just got up in the background Basketball Reference do a thing where they do an MVP award tracker, which basically spits in all the numbers and uses historical precedents and puts a percentage against each player's name as to historically, based on the stats, who should be winning the MVP. According to their little model, Jokic should win the MVP 57% of the time, and Doncic is 21%, and everyone else is under 5%.
Yeah, right.
So, again, I think that just reinforces that if it was played in the lab, which thank God it's not, but if it was played in the lab and just looking at numbers, Jokic is having the best season.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see, like you said, because we've been saying this a couple of times, a 5-game win streak from Doncic, which he just had, got him from the fringes of that discussion back up to the top.
Yep.
Whereas if the Mavs lose 5 games in a row, then his MVP hopes could be gone. So it's going to be a very, very loud MVP race. After All-Star weekend.
That's right. Probably will be a roast as well if the wrong person gets picked and the fans don't like it. You had something you wanted to talk. I can't bring up the thing at the moment, but Joe Ingles has been on your mind of recent. I mean, he's always on your mind. You're a big Jingles guy.
I am. He's had a very up and down start to his NBA return, but this morning, as we record this, his Bucks just went into MSG, the best arena in basketball, and the Bucks came back from a massive deficit and walked all over New York. So the thing that was cool about this morning, having just watched the highlights of the game, is that Joe looked like he did 5 years ago. He was playing his pick and roll game. He was stepping into threes, and the Bucks were down big, and their offense was dead, completely flat. And then, well, thanks to Giannis, but with Joe riding shotgun, they were able to generate enough offense in the second half, come back, win a game, and look good doing so. So a single victory over New York when you played horribly in the first half isn't that noteworthy, but the Bucks are still missing Chris Middleton. Drew Holiday has been a bit part player over the past 2 months. Joe Ingles has barely played. So it's almost the opposite of what we said about Doncic, I think, for the Bucks and Ingles. It doesn't matter where they finish in the standings. Giannis has got his MVPs. They don't need to win games. They've got between now and the end of April to get fit, get healthy, and get together.
Yep.
And that's why for Ingles, especially this morning and the last couple of games have been good, because for him personally with mine, the scoreboard doesn't matter. It's just him getting out there looking comfortable again. And again, not to make this a Mavs Central podcast, but how good would you feel if Ingles was on the Mavs? Just having that creator and someone to help out Luka.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I can't watch him shoot. It always makes me feel weird with that sort of cocked behind his head, left-handed thing that looks so weird, but he gets it done. Jingles. I look forward to the day that maybe he will be in the NBL. I thought we were close to that, but now that he's getting that form back again, I can't imagine an NBA team letting him slip.
We need one more big player from Joe, because what I kind of want to happen, like he did when he was in OKC playing against OKC, for Utah, going against Russell Westbrook and Paul George, players that he's nowhere near as good as, but he's got that like smart-ass Australian streak to him, doesn't he? I could see him playing against the Boston Celtics in the playoffs and being the player that Boston crowd hates the most, because he's going to be annoying and irritating. Same thing in Philadelphia. Having lived in Philly, the Philly fans would absolutely despise Joe Ingles if he was playing them in a series. So I think selfishly, I'd love to see, I don't care about the Bucks so much, but I'd love to see Joe have a deep playoff run and get a chance to win a championship. Because I think as well, the content, the entertainment, and just having him have that moment is going to give us a lot that we'll be able to look forward to. So yeah,
for sure.
Hopefully he comes back to the NBL eventually. I'm sure he's got enough money to buy half the league at this stage.
Yes.
But he's got business to finish over in the States first.
That's right. And when there isn't any other team to go for in the playoffs because the Mavs are out, I'll get behind a team that's somehow closely linked to an Australian. And if that's Jingles, then I'm getting on the Bucks bandwagon, that's for sure. Let's turn over a little bit to the NBL now. You brought up a tweet from someone F_Olivo99, tweeted out something around pace of the league, which was pretty interesting, that sort of puts the NBL up in the NBA standards.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? And it really clearly outlines the American focus that has come into the NBL of late. Yep. And so basically what Francesco did was that he went through and looked at all of the leagues, basketball around the world, so European leagues, Asian leagues, the NBL and the NBA, and compared the pace of play in the NBA against all the leagues around the world. And interestingly enough, the only league that compares to the NBA in terms of pace of play, which essentially means the number of possessions that are in a game, is the NBL. And you've got teams like the Sydney Kings that are playing at a pace that resembles an NBA side, which probably is why they're such an entertaining team to watch, because they're up and back. They've got athletes like Xavier Cork, and they're really deploying NBA-style methods and game plans, and they're doing it in Australia and doing it very well. So that was super interesting to see this morning. As I said, it makes sense given all of the American influences that have come back. Even look at someone like Danny Mills at the Wildcats, who gets a lot of grief locally, but he's playing a very American-centric style of ball, that you've got a small ball 5-man, you've got athletic perimeter players that want to shoot the ball, get up and down the court. In the Wildcats' case, that cost them defense, but their offense is high-flying. They're pushing the ball and getting that pace of play up. And again, it also makes the NBL even more attractive. That is definitely a cliche that too many people talk about that are around the NBL. I'm getting a bit sick of hearing it, but there is some truth to it, because athletes can come down to Australia, play in an NBA-style game and setting and tempo. And again, Xavier Cook's the perfect example. Like Jock Landale, Xavier's going to be in the NBA next year. He's going to be playing minutes, and he's not going to look out of place doing so.
Yeah, that's right. The NBL's, for me, like, it has gotten faster and faster. But if I think back to sort of 4 or 5 years ago, the Wildcats dominated because they used to slow the game down and they would just beat you down on defense. And so it is interesting. And like you said, a lot of American influence coming over, and that's in players, coaches. The NBL's definitely opened up that a little bit more to bring assistant coaches from NBA teams over to take on NBL teams, and they'll be bringing in those coaching methods as well to up the pace. And if you're playing at a fast clip, the other team can't set up quickly enough on defense, and you're making them scatter. So it is definitely a good way to score. So yeah, interesting that the NBL is up there, and it's always been considered top 3 to 4 leagues in the world, but it is in that pace chart that Francesco put up. They're quite significantly higher up above
the EuroLeagues.
The EuroLeagues. So it's not like we're just above them. There's a huge step between NBA and NBL than the rest.
No, I think it's all about nuance as well. When talking about what the second best league in the world is, you talk to the players and the agents, and if it's purely about the average player's talent base, then the EuroLeague is the second best league in the world. But if you're talking about wanting to get ready for the NBA and put yourself in a position to, again, get NBA level systems and processes, there is an argument that the NBL is second best in that aim behind probably the G League at the moment, because it is set up like the NBA now. Also, there's not as much money in Australia. The fact the Wildcats can get sold for $9 million, that's a lot of money in Australian standards, but globally, Real Madrid spend that much money on their basketball program every year. So until the money infiltrates the sport in this country fully, it's not going to be the second best league in the world fully. But at the moment, stats like this morning show that it's doing a lot right.
Yeah.
And again, hopefully as they get a bit more attention, there's a wave of Paddy Mills and Joe Ingles coming back, hopefully spending their money on the league. Some of that money can come back, and it really can start to elevate over the next decade and push the EuroLeague for being the second best league in the world.
For sure. And that just only means that we'll get more talented players that are sort of fringe NBA guys that are wanting somewhere else to play. And look, there's a lot going for the Australian League, that's for sure. So hopefully we'll see more guys coming over. this isn't a Perth Wildcats podcast, but we do both live in Perth. I'm currently in Melbourne. You're about to move to Melbourne, so maybe we'll even it out a little bit. But it is an outdoor step, so it's hard not to talk about. Right now, as we record, well, not right now as we record because it's 7 o'clock for me, but not for you. The Wildcats will be playing the Breakers, so you're going to be listening to this the day after it's happened, so you know the result. But it is a really crucial game for two teams who the Wildcats need to prove that they can beat a decent team and they can actually be a contender in that top four. And the Breakers need to show that they weren't just lightning in a bottle at the start of the season, that they are actually serious. And they a win against the Wildcats would there's always been a big rivalry. It's like West Coast and Fremantle, regardless of where a team is in the league. When those two teams play, if Fremantle's a bottom of the ladder, it's going to be intense. It's going to be a good game usually, and that's a bit like Wildcats and Breakers. So, what do you see with those two teams and how important this game is?
Yeah, I'm actually heading along tonight, so it'd be interesting to see what version of the Wildcats show up, because if they, again, I personally think they've got next to no chance of winning a championship this year or pushing for the finals. But you're right, pushing for the grand final, sorry. If they have any hopes of doing that, they need to start beating these good teams. But then distilling that down a little bit, they've got New Zealand tonight, Adelaide over the weekend, and Sydney next Friday night. Just by the sheer weight of numbers, they need at least one win and probably two out of those games if they want to be making the top six. So it's not a win or go home situation for the Wildcats just yet, because the league is pretty average in the middle.
Yes.
But they've done this all year where they go and win one game, lose two, win two, and they've just been on that seesaw back and front.
Yeah.
They've got 8 games left, 6 of them are at home. And it's really the same situation that we saw last year, where last year they did slide out of the top 4, but it was in their hands that all they had to do was win some home games and they would have made the finals last year. And I think they lost the last 4 games at home last year. It's exactly the same situation right now. 6 of 8 at home to close the season. If you're a finals team, you win enough games and you make the finals. And it's that simple for the Wildcats, not to make it too reductive. But we're going to find out if they are actually good enough. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but it's defensively, because their offense is one of the best 2 units in the league. The stats bear that out. They can score the ball. Yep. But I think a pick and roll with me and you could get a good shot against the Wildcats at the moment. And if the shots aren't falling,
I'd be setting the pick, by the way.
Yeah, and I'd be hurling it towards the basket. It might hit the backboard. So it's just a case of whether they can find enough offense to make that happen. The maybe one good thing tonight, which could look foolish as people listen to this, is that New Zealand has to go back to Melbourne in 2 days' time and play another game because the last contest was called off with the COVID cases they had. So if you're a Wildcats optimist, you might be hoping that the Breakers' mind is elsewhere or the travel schedule is going to catch up with them. Because really, if these two teams are playing on a neutral court, given what we've seen this season, the Wildcats would be 4 or 5 point underdogs in my eyes. But it's at home, they have a chance. Yeah. But regardless what happens tonight, it's going to mean the weekend is going to be even better, because if they lose tonight, then there is going to be a lot of pressure on everyone against Adelaide this weekend. Mm-hmm. And if they can win tonight, then it gives them the chance to push for the top 4 and at least have home court advantage at the start of the playoff round. So it's a big week for the Wildcats, and we're about to see if they are a legit playoff side or not over the next 10 days.
It's funny, they've just been doing this all season. You think, like, if they just win the next 2, they'll look all right. And now it's got to the point where if they go beat New Zealand, Adelaide, Sydney, which would be an impressive string of games, to beat those 3 teams, I would still be like, yeah, I'm still not sure about them though. Like it's just they've instilled no faith. Like even when they have one good game, I'm like, oh man, like if they play like this, there's they might steal a game or 2 against the team in the finals. But I've just got no confidence in them at the moment. And Bryce is playing like just insanely good at the moment. It's just a shame that he's not getting the help that is necessary. And the more the team just not really gelling, as I think, as we've seen.
Yeah, well, they've done that all year, haven't they? That they won in New Zealand. They had that great game against Adelaide where Bryce went nuts and Brady hit some shots. They pulled that game out of their backside against Melbourne at home. So they've got some noteworthy wins, but they've lost twice to Brisbane on the road. Yeah. So again, if they won those 2 games, they'd be pushing for 3rd spot.
Yeah,
on
that's
the flip
the thing.
side, if they lost that game to Melbourne at home, which they should have, they could be in 8th spot. So again, there's some they've got, there's some they've lost, which again speaks to the fact that they're just playing average at the moment.
That's
and
right.
Again, we like the people involved with the Wildcats. We know a couple of them personally.
Yeah.
But they're just chalk average this year. And again, not to get too cliche, but it's that whole thing about a team that can shoot the ball but can't stop anyone. They can beat anyone on any given night, but they can't consistently get stops. And so any Wildcats game is not out of reach. And we've seen it time and time again. The most recent loss in Brisbane is the one that comes to mind, that they should have won that game many times over, but they just kept letting Brisbane get buckets and keep pace. And then before they know it, they're down 5 points and the game's about to finish in overtime. And they've somehow lost to the second worst team in the league twice at home, which is just a horrible outcome for a team that likes to think of themselves as a top 4 side.
That's right. Yeah, I really hope things turn around a little bit for Mitch Norton. Big Mitch Norton fan. Love what he does on the court, and not that this time is over, but I remember a time when he was touted as taking the baton from Damian Martin. He was the defensive guard that was that could stop players, and you could also put the ball in his hands in a pick and roll situation. He'd drive to the hoop. It's just not the same Mitch Norton that we've seen, which is a shame because when he's playing well, the Wildcats play well. He's sort of almost like a pinch point for them. So I would love to see him sort of get back and confident again. But when you bring in Ty Webster, which I'm still confused about that decision for the Wildcats, it does just throw things up. Like it's a player who would take minutes away from Mitch.
Yeah, well, again, that signing, we haven't spoke about this, but that strikes me as the Wildcats needing and wanting someone, and he was the best available player. And it's almost them rolling the dice and saying, screw it, that we can't get any stops to begin with, so let's try to score 110 points a game, and let's try to catch lightning in the bottle and go on a run and make a deep playoff run, which, again, we both have been around this sport long enough to know that that's probably not going to happen. And even you said before, when we were talking about the pace of play, that 5 years ago the Wildcats would grind out these games based on Bryce and some good players around him, but it was more of that heliocentric, the Luka Doncic comparison, right? We got one amazing player and great role players around him. And 5 years ago, that was enough to win championships in the NBL. But now it's not good enough anymore because the league has gotten so much better around the Wildcats. And we've spoken about this before. The Wildcats fans, I think, are learning that what works so well for the last 30 years isn't going to work for the next 30 years because this club really needs to get serious about things off the court and have better systems in place, because sheer talent alone isn't enough to win games and finals in the NBL these days.
That's right. One more thing for fans to get annoyed at is the open air game that's being played at RAC Arena here in Perth. Now, I think it's really cool. I know they did it a little while. Did they do it last season or the season before in Melbourne?
They've done it in Melbourne a couple of years, and they did it this year as well.
Yeah, it's just it's cool. It's something different. But I know from visiting some of the say what you will about these Wildcats fan pages, I just know how many complaints there has been about it. People complaining about the direction of the sun being on their seats and wanting to get a change in seats because of that. I just hope that people can just go, you know what, it's just something different. It might not be the best thing I've ever been to. It might be a little bit inconvenient, but it's also just something different and something cool that the NBL is obviously trying to do. And they've got a really good arena. Why not give it a crack? I don't understand this. Like, oh, it's something different, so I'll get annoyed about it.
Correct. We're both from Perth, so I'm allowed to say this. Like, Perth people can be very silly sometimes and very slow to catch up with things. That anyone that looked at what happened in Melbourne last month with the open air game, that looked cool. It was a great innovation. It was fun. There was light on the court. It was a great idea. And it's one game in a regular season. I don't see the big deal. And again, it's entitled Wildcats fans. I might get a bit of grief for that, wanting something to complain about, and they're just doing it. And there's no downside to having this game outside on Saturday night. It's a cool idea. Like, I'm going. I know you might be going. It's going to get casual people to go to the basketball on a Saturday night. Mm-hmm. And what's not to like? It's a basketball game with some sunlight. It's not going to change the experience in any adverse way. Wear your sunglasses. Wear some sunscreen. It's not going to impact your night. Take a hat. I'm as pale as the rest of them, and no one gets as pale as I do. So get ready, take the sunscreen. I'll be ready. And just go enjoy what is potentially a once in a season, once in a lifetime experience to go enjoy basketball outside. And it doesn't really matter what happens on the court because it's a noteworthy event. So, I support the NBL for doing it. I support the Wildcats for doing it. This should be a fixture every year. The Wildcats, like the Dockers with their Anzac Day game throughout the season, how they've turned it into their own. The Wildcats should pick Australia Day Eve or New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve or pick a night and have an outdoor game every year. I think that would be a great idea, and just hopefully enough people show up. And you know what Perth fans like, hopefully the Wildcats win on Saturday, because if they win, then it'll be the greatest idea in the world.
We play this every week. We should play with the roof off.
Correct.
Yeah, well, I know Craig Hutchison listens to this, so Hutchie, maybe just pick some more games with open air. Look, people just don't like going outside anymore. We're becoming so insular, and we don't want to stay indoors. But no, it should be fun. I'm going to try and get along for sure. But yeah, I'll hopefully, unless you know what, tomorrow night tonight, if you're listening to this on a Wednesday, when I meet Dirk, and he might say, Dad, you're just great. I just, you know what, you just come hang out with me for the next little while. And I probably would do that. I've already discussed that with my wife. Like there's certain things that if they come up, she's sort of giving me the all clear. If he's like, come on holiday with me for the next week and hang out, like I think I've got the green light for that. So,
well, just a bit of advice that an old colleague used to give me when I was 17: just don't get arrested. So behave yourself. Make sure you don't get too into Dirk's grill. I know it might be hard to withhold yourself and behave, but yeah, I need to see you back in Perth on the weekend in the flesh and not on a Zoom call.
That's right.
Cell somewhere in Melbourne,
bailing me out. No, Dirk will bail. No, Dirk's a good guy. I won't get up in his grill. I think I've got. I think I've been around enough athletes to not fanboy around them. Dirk will be the closest thing. Maybe probably Luca as well. But I think I can contain myself and make sure. But
what do you think he would say if you told him about the time you got his shower water on your hand?
I think he would love it. I think it's really funny. So look, if that comes up, I'm not going to, like, the first thing I can't say to him was like, Dirk, hey, good to see you again. Last time we saw each other, your shower water was splashing. So that might not be appropriate, but who knows? If I've had a few beers and mood's feeling right, maybe, yeah. I am going to get along. There's a Dirk, like a appearance at a shop somewhere in the city that I'm aware of. So I'm going to try and get along to that. I'm not really much of an autograph guy, and I also don't want to ask him for a photo. So look, who knows? Maybe I'll bow out and he'll sign my chest or something. I don't know.
That would be a sight for the Instagram, wouldn't it? Just a topless photo of Dan with a Dirk Nowitzki signature. I just want to know, what would your wife say about that if you saw a photo? Would she expect such behaviour?
No, she wouldn't be surprised at all. What I'd probably do is convert it into a tattoo. Like I'd get him to sign it, I wouldn't wash it off, and then I'd go to a tattoo artist and I'd go over the top. I think that'd be cool.
Well, a tangent. My sister knows a guy in Richmond that does tattoos. So if you need to hook up tomorrow,
awesome.
Send me a message, and Kate, my sister, will look after you, and we get some fresh ink for the plane home.
Good. Well, yeah, it's nothing like being on a flight for a few hours, let alone a flight with some fresh itchy ink. No, I definitely won't be doing that. But look, I'll be back in Perth for next week. Greg's going to be around. We're going to talk about some more basketball, of course, because this is the BackChat Basketball Show. You can find us BackChat_basketball on Instagram, or send us an email, hello@backchatpodcast.com.au. Any final thoughts before I leave you here?
No, just stay safe out there. Don't burn down Richmond before I arrive, and enjoy Dirk, and we need to see you back in Perth on Monday.
All right, will do. I'll speak to you soon.